Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that takes a stack of your sources and really finds the knowledge nuggets you need.
We dig through it so you don't have to.
Exactly. And today we're tackling a topic that's, well, it looks amazing, but maybe a bit intimidating for some folks.
Setting up your first saltwater reef aquarium. It's a big one.
Yeah, it really is. We're focusing specifically on tank sizes from 10 gallons up to about 100 gallons.
Right. Using the articles, guides, notes that you listeners shared with us, they cover pretty much everything.
Costs, equipment, picking your first fish, corals, the whole journey, really.
It's true. Reefing has this reputation, for being complex, and there is a learning curve, no doubt.
But these sources seem to break it down pretty well.
They do. Our goal today is basically to unpack what these sources highlight as the most important stuff for a beginner.
Right, looking at different tank sizes, the gear you'll actually need, what creatures can live in there.
And crucially, how to approach it patiently without making those common, sometimes expensive beginner mistakes.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Before we dive right in, just a quick mention that this clip is brought to you by Fab's Reef.
Great stuff from Fab's Reef.
Definitely. Now let's quickly hit some terms you'll hear constantly in these sources and just in the hobby in general.
Good idea. They pop up all the time.
You'll see G, that's easy, just gallons, tank volume.
And W for watts, usually talking about equipment power, like lights or heaters.
Then there's AIO.
Right. AIO stands for all-in-one. Describes those tanks with built-in filtration compartments hidden in the back.
Keeps the main tank looking clean.
Exactly. And the other common one is HOB.
HOB, hang on back. That's for filters or protein skimmers that literally just hang on the back rim of the tank.
Often seen on simpler, maybe smaller setups or sumpless systems.
Got it. Okay, definitions out of the way. Now, cost. The sources mention a general rule of thumb.
Ah, yes. The potential sticker shock number.
Maybe. They suggest budgeting somewhere around $50 to $200 per gallon.
Per gallon. And that's once you factor in the tank, all the gear, rock, sand, and your initial livestock.
That can sound pretty daunting, especially when you think about, say, a 100-gallon tank.
It really can. But it's crucial to remember it's an average, a guideline. The sources definitely emphasize that low-cost strategies exist.
Especially for smaller tanks, right?
Absolutely. You can get started for significantly less if you're smart about it, maybe use some DIY or buy used gear. It's about getting functional first, not necessarily top-of-the-line everything.
Okay, let's unpack these tank sizes then. The sources really hammer home one core principle right away.
Which is?
More water volume generally means more stability.
Yeah.
And more forgiveness for you as a beginner.
That is the absolute key takeaway when you're comparing sizes. Couldn't agree more.
Smaller tanks are cheaper up front, take less space.
But they are way, way less stable. Any little change, feeding too much, forgetting to top off evaporated water.
It hits the water chemistry hard and fast.
Exactly. Exponentially harder to manage than a larger volume.
Which brings us logically to the smallest tank discussed. The 10-gallon nano reef tank.
The nano. Cheapest, most space-saving.
The sources also call it the least forgiving.
Least forgiving, absolutely. Think about it like spilling a tiny bit of something potent into a coffee cup versus a bathtub.
Yeah, okay, good analogy.
That tiny imbalance in a 10-gallon tank just throws everything off kilter almost immediately, keeping temperature stable, salinity stable, all those crucial parameters.
It needs daily diligence, really watching it closely.
Every single day.
So how did the sources suggest someone might even approach this size if they're set on it? Seems like a few ways.
Yeah, there are three main paths outlined. First is the low-cost DIY build.
Okay, break that down.
You buy a basic 10-gallon glass tank, super cheap, often on sale. Then you add the essential bits yourself.
Like?
A simple HOB filter, or maybe a small internal filter. A heater, probably 25 or 50 watts. A small power head for water movement.
And the light that's critical for corals, right?
Absolute critical. You'd need an affordable LED that's still strong enough for easy beginner corals. Something like an iCrew, maybe in the $50, $100 range.
Using dry rock and dry sand helps keep initial costs down, too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cheaper than live rock. So piecing it together like that, the notes suggest you could get a basic 10-gram reef setup running for maybe $250 to $300. Before fish or coral, obviously.
Okay, that's pretty affordable up front.
It is. The pro is that low cost, and you control exactly what gear you buy. You can upgrade pieces later.
Cons.
It requires more research to make sure everything works together. It's not plug and play. Cheap gear might fail sooner or just not perform well.
And fundamentally, it's still a 10-gallon tank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Still inherently unstable compared to larger options.
Okay, option 2. The ready-made starter kit. You see these boxes in pet stores.
Yep, they look convenient. Tank, filter, maybe lid with a light, all in one box.
But there's a catch for reef tanks, according to the sources.
A big catch. Most of those standard kits are designed for freshwater fish, maybe fish-only saltwater. The included light is almost never strong enough for corals.
Ah. So you buy the kit.
And then you immediately have to go buy a separate, probably more expensive, reef-capable LED light anyway.
Kind of defeats the purpose of the kit saving money.
Pretty much. You might pay for the initial convenience, but you're upgrading the most crucial piece right away. Limited customization, too.
Okay. Third option for a 10-gallon. The all-in-one AIO nano tank. These seem popular.
Very popular in the nano-reef world. Tanks like the Fluval Sea EVO 13.5 gallon or the innovative Marine Fusion 10 gallon.
What makes an AIO?
They have that built-in rear compartment. It hides the filter media, the heater, the return pump, keeps the display area really clean and uncluttered.
Sleek looking.
Yeah, they look nice. They're compact, often quieter because the pump is enclosed. Some might even come with a light that can support some easy corals.
Sounds like a good option for a beginner then.
Yeah.
Easier.
Generally, yes, the setup is more straightforward. But there are trade-offs. You usually pay a premium for that integrated design. The cost per gallon can be higher than DIY.
And limitations.
The rear chambers are fixed sizes, so your options for upgrading equipment like putting in a bigger skimmer or reactor later are limited. The stock gear's often just okay, middle of the road.
And you might still outgrow the 10-gallon size pretty quickly.
Very likely.
So, summing up the 10-gallon, pros, low initial cost, small footprint, water changes are small volume. Cons, least stable, very limited livestock, maybe one tiny fish, couple of shrimp. Super unforgiving of any mistakes.
Yeah, the sources are pretty clear. While it's possible to succeed with a 10-gallon reef, they often strongly recommend starting bigger, like 20 to 40 gallons, if you have the space and budget.
Which naturally leads us to the 20-gallon reef tank. The sources call this the minimum sweet spot for beginners.
That's a term you see a lot. It's a really good starting point.
Why is it significantly better than the 10?
You gain a substantial amount of stability without a massive jump in cost or footprint. That extra 10 gallons acts as a much bigger buffer against those water chemistry swings.
Makes sense. And the sources mention a specific shape.
Yeah, the 20 long dimension, 30 inches long by 12 inches wide, is really popular for reefs at this size.
Why the long?
That longer, shallower shape gives you better surface area for gas exchange and more horizontal room for placing rocks and corals compared to a standard, taller 20-gallon high.
Okay, let's look at the setup options for a 20-gallon. Still DIY possible.
Oh yeah, definitely. Low-cost DIY build is still very viable. The tank itself is only slightly more, maybe $30, $50.
What about the gear? Needs to be bigger?
Yep. You'd want a more robust HOB filter like an AquaClear 50 or 70. Or maybe your first small HOB protein skimmer. Heater bumps up to maybe 100 watts. A power head for flow.
And the light. That was the big cost jump mentioned.
Still is. Covering that 30-inch length and providing enough intensity for corals means you're probably looking at a mid-range LED, maybe at $200 or even a bit more for a good one. That's often the single most expensive piece of equipment.
Okay, so ballpark cost for a functional DIY 20-gallon reef.
The sources suggest somewhere in the $500 to $800 range is realistic for decent functional gear, though you could definitely trim that with used stuff or very budget choices.
Pros of the DIY 20.
You still get customization, but the big win is significantly better stability than the 10-gallon. Much more breathing room for mistakes. Plus, with a 20-foot all long, you have a nice footprint to work with. You even technically have the option of adding a small sump later if you start with a drillable tank, though that adds complexity.
Cons.
Still requires research to piece together. Still a relatively small volume, so your fish choices are limited to small peaceful species. Can't go crazy with stocking.
What about kits around 20 gallons? Are there dedicated reef kits?
Fewer dedicated reef kits right at the 20-gallon mark compared to, say, the 10 or 30 range. The sources mention the CoreLife BioCube, specifically the 16 and 32-gallon models.
Those are AIOs, right? But sold as kits.
Kind of. They're all-in-ones designed with reefing in mind, and they come with the basic integrated gear pump, filter media, basic lighting. So they're closer to plug and play.
Cost on those?
Around $250, $300 for the 16G, maybe $500 plus for the 32G. They're a popular starting point for people wanting that integrated look.
Downsides.
Their closed design makes upgrading the internal equipment tricky, and they aren't the ideal 20 long dimensions. Standard freshwater kits still need that big light upgrade we talked about.
And pure 20G AIO tanks, not kits.
Yep, similar options to the 10 grid, just bigger. Innovative Marine Fusion 20 Pro. Waterbox says 2025 G cubes or peninsulas. The tank and built-in filtration might run you $200, $400 plus.
But you still need to buy the lights separately for most of those.
Usually, yes. That's a key point.
Pros of the 20G AIOs.
Streamlined. Look, no external plumbing worries, a really nice balance of manageable size and easier initial setup compared to a full DIY with potential sump. Cons are similar to the 10-gear AIOs. The rear filtration space is still somewhat limited for adding bigger gear later. You might need specific slim versions of heaters or skimmers.
And evaporation is still a big deal.
Huge deal in AIOs, especially smaller ones. That small rear chamber volume means evaporation can swing salinity quickly. You absolutely have to top off with fresh water diligently, probably daily.
Okay, let's sum up the 20-gallon. Pros. Great compromise size, moderate cost, much more stable than a 10-gram, more equipment choices available. Stocking still limited to small, peaceful fish, requires careful management.
But a key point mentioned is that weekly maintenance, like a 5-gallon water change, is really easy and effective at this size for keeping nutrients in check. Plus, a 20-gram makes a great quarantine or coral frag tank later if you upgrade.
Good point. Okay, moving up the scale. Now we get to what many sources call the ideal beginner's tank. The 40-gallon reef tank, specifically the 40-gallon breeder.
The 40 breeder. Yes, this one gets a lot of love in the reefing community, and for good reason.
Why is it so highly recommended? What makes it the sweet spot?
It hits this perfect balance. You get a substantial water volume, close to 4 times a 10-gallon, which means excellent stability. Parameter swings are much slower, giving beginners way more time to react, and a much bigger margin for error.
And the shape.
The dimensions are key. 36 inches long, but crucially, 18 inches front to back. That 18-inch width provides a fantastic spacious canvas for aquascaping compared to the narrow 12 or 13 inches of smaller tanks or the 55G.
Room to build cool rock structures.
Exactly. And because it's such a popular standard size, the tanks themselves, stands, and finding used equipment are often readily available and relatively affordable.
So how do you set up a 40 breeder according to the sources? DIY options.
2 main DIY routes are discussed. Simple and sumpless, or with a sump.
Let's start simplet.
Okay. You get a standard 40 breeder tank, maybe $50, $100. For filtration, you'd rely on powerful HOB filters, or maybe a large HOB protein skimmer rated for 50 gallons or more, heater around 150 watts. And because it's 3 feet long, you'll need multiple power heads for good flow across the whole tank. Lighting-wise, probably 2 medium-sized LED units or 1 longer 36-mix fixture.
Okay. Now, the option with a sump sounds more advanced.
It is, but it's the preferred route for many, especially if you think you'll get serious about corals later. You either get a reef-ready 40 breeder tank, which comes pre-drilled with an overflow.
Or you drill a standard tank yourself, if you're comfortable with that.
Right. Then you place another tank, usually a 20 or 30-gallon long, underneath in the stand to act as the sump.
What's the big advantage of adding a sump?
Several big ones. It increases your total system water volume by another 15, 20 gallons, boosting stability even more. It lets you hide all your equipment skimmer, heater, maybe reactors down below, keeping the display tank clean. And it gives you space for much larger, more effective in-sump protein skimmers, and potentially a refugium section, a place to grow beneficial algae that helps control nutrients.
But it adds cost and complexity up front.
Definitely. You need the sump tank, the overflow box, if not reef-ready, the plumbing, and a return pump to get water back up to the display.
What's the cost range looking like for a 40 DIY setup?
A decent sumpless 40 breeder might be in the $600, $1,000 range, depending heavily on light quality. But a well-equipped 40 breeder with a sump, good skimmer, good lights, you could easily be pushing $1,000 or more. But importantly, for the stability and the potential you get at that volume, it's often considered very cost-effective per gallon compared to the premium you pay for nano setups.
Okay, pros of the 40G DIY.
Excellent stability, great dimensions for aquascaping, handles the fish waste, bioload, much better than smaller tanks. Temperature and salinity are far more stable, and the option for a sump offers serious filtration flexibility.
Tons.
You absolutely need a proper, sturdy stand. A filled 40 breeder with rock and sand is well over 300 pounds, maybe 350 plus twos. Sumpless HOB gear can look bulky hanging on the back, and the sump route adds complexity and initial cost.
Are there ready-made kits or AIOs around the 40-gallon size?
Fewer true beginner kits. The sources mention high-end options like the Red Sea Max E170, which is around 45 gallons total, includes gear, but costs well over $1,000. More common are systems like Waterbox offers maybe a 50-gallon AIO with the back chamber, or there's 60-gallon systems that come with a tank, stand, and sump, but you buy all the equipment separately. Those tank, stand, sump packages can be $500,000 plus just for the basics.
What about standard pet store tank stand combos?
You usually need significant equipment upgrades, especially the lighting, just like the smaller kits.
And AIOs like the innovative Marine Nouveau Fusion 40.
Yep, those exist. Tank plus the back filtration chamber, probably $500 and $700 plus just for the tank. Still need add lights, maybe a skimmer designed for that chamber.
Pros for those AIOs at this size.
Still that clean look, no external plumbing to worry about, decent size without a huge footprint. Cons are still the limited space in that back chamber compared to a full sump. You pay a price premium. And honestly, once you get above 40 gallons or so, many reefers prefer the flexibility of a sump anyway.
Okay, summing up the 40-gallon breeder. Pros, widely considered the beginner sweet spot, large enough for great stability, allows a nice variety of fish and corals, maybe 5, 6 small to medium fish comfortably, handles bioload better, more forgiving, often costs less per gallon for the stability gained.
Cons definitely more maintenance work than a nano, like 8, 10-gallon weekly water changes. Higher initial cost than nanos, absolutely requires a good stand and dedicated space. But yeah, a hugely popular and rewarding size to start with.
Yeah.
Many people find it's a great long-term tank too.
All right. Moving up again. Next is a very common size people encounter, often as their first large tank, the 55-gallon reef tank.
Ah, the 55. Ubiquitous in the fish world.
But it has a significant quirk for reefing, right? The sources mention this specifically.
Yes, the dimensions are the big talking point. It's 48 inches long, same as a 75-gallon, but it's only 13 inches front to back. That narrow footprint is the main challenge for reef aquascaping and coral placement compared to the wider 40 breeder or 75-gallon.
Harder to create depth and layers with the rockwork.
Exactly. And harder to get good light spread and water flow front to back.
So how would you set up a 55G reef, according to the sources? DIY options?
You can run it simplest. You'd need strong HOB filters, maybe a large HOB skimmer rated for the volume. Canister filters are sometimes used.
But there's a warning about canisters.
Yeah, the sources caution they can easily become nitrate factories if you don't clean them out religiously, like weekly or biweekly. They trap a lot of detritus.
Okay. Lighting for a 4-foot tank.
Needs to cover that 48-inch length. So typically 2 medium LED fixtures, or 1 long 48-pink fixture. Almost certainly needs an upgrade from any standard kit light. Circulation needs careful planning. 2, multiple power heads are needed to get good flow across the length and deal with the height, often 21 inches tall, which can make getting flow and light penetration down to the bottom a bit tricky.
Cost estimate for getting a 55G reef functional with corals.
Probably going to be more than the 40 breeder, just because you need more rock, more salt mix, maybe slightly higher capacity gear. The sources suggest budgeting maybe $800 to $1,200 for decent equipment to support corals, though you could spend less if just keeping fish.
Pros of the 55-gallon, why do people choose it?
Availability and affordability are big ones. Standard 55-key tanks are everywhere, often found cheap or used. You get a decent volume, 50 gallons for stability, at a potentially low entry price for the tank itself. The 4-foot length does give fish more swimming room, allowing maybe slightly more fish options than a 40G, and its slim profile fits well in some spaces.
Cons, we mentioned the narrow width.
That's the main one. Really limits aquascaping possibilities. Another significant issue mentioned is that many standard 55-gallon tanks, especially older ones, are not drillable because the bottom panel is often tempered glass.
Which makes adding a sump much harder.
Right. You'd have to use an external hang-on overflow box, which some people find less reliable or aesthetically pleasing than built-in overflows. Maintenance is also a larger scale, 10-15-gallon water changes.
Kits or AIOs specific to 55 gallons.
Standard freshwater kits are common, but again, need that big light upgrade for reef use. Very few dedicated reef kits at exactly 55G. You might look at manufacturer systems around that size, like the Red Sea Reefer 250, which is about 54G display plus sump, but those are premium higher cost packages. True rear chamber AIOs are pretty rare above 40 gallons. You might see DIY AIO conversion kits, but that's not standard.
Okay, summarizing the 55 gallon. Pros, an accessible size, often cheap to acquire the tank, offers more stability and swim length than nanos. Maybe allows consideration of a slightly larger beginner fish if researched carefully. Cons, the narrow shape is suboptimal for reef layout. Many upgrades later to a 75G for better proportions. The non-drillable glass can be a pain for some, requires careful aquascaping and flow management. Higher total cost than 40G, but possibly less per gallon if the tank itself is cheap. Budget for quality gear upgrades.
It's a stepping stone tank for many. Which leads us to the size often considered one of the best large tanks for beginners, the 75-gallon reef tank.
Okay, this one gets high praise in the sources, too. Why is it so much better than the 55, given they're both 4 feet long?
It's all about that width again. The 75-gallon standard dimension is 48 inches long, but 18 inches front to back. Same width as the highly regarded 40 breeder, just longer and taller.
Ah, so you get the length and the good width.
Exactly. That 18-inch depth makes a huge difference for aquascaping, coral placement, flow dynamics, and just overall visual appeal. It gives you so much more room to create layers and depth. Many serious reef hobbyists start with a 75G. It's big enough to house a great diversity of fish and corals, including some larger beginner-friendly species, but it's not so massive that maintenance becomes overwhelming.
How do the sources recommend setting up a 75G DIY? Simple as possible.
Possible, but the sources strongly lean towards using some filtration at this size and larger. The benefits really start to outweigh the simplicity of each OB gear.
So ideally, a reef-ready 75G tank.
Yes, buying a reef-ready tank pre-drilled with built-in overflow is the easiest route. Or you could drill a standard 75G if you're up for it. Then you use a sump underneath a 20-gallon long or 30-gallon breeder tank is commonly used as a sump for a 75G display.
Adds another 15-20 gallons of water volume, plus space for gear.
Right. Space for a larger, more efficient in-sump protein skimmer. Heaters, often 2 smaller ones like 150W each for redundancy. Maybe media reactors for carbon or phosphate remover. Keeps a display tank looking super clean.
What about the gear requirements? Stepping up significantly.
Definitely. Need higher capacity equipment across the board. A protein skimmer rated for around 100 gallons, those 250W heaters. Strong circulation, you'll need multiple power heads or maybe a gyro pump, totaling probably 2,000 plus gallons per hour of flow distributed across the 4-foot length.
And lighting. Big investment here.
Yeah, lighting a 48 by 18-inch area adequately for corals requires good fixtures. You're looking at needing 2 or maybe even 3 quality LED modules, or perhaps a 4-foot T5 high-output fixture. Lighting can easily be several $100s or more for a 75G.
So what's the estimated cost for a well-set-up DIY 75G with a sump?
If you're buying all new, decent quality gear, the sources suggest you're easily looking at $1,500 to $2,000, maybe even more, depending on your specific choices for lights and skimmer.
Can it be done cheaper?
You could probably get functional for closer to $1,000, $1,200.
Yeah.
If you're really savvy with finding used equipment or making some budget compromises, but it's a significant investment regardless.
Okay, let's talk pros for the DIY 75G. Seems like a lot of them.
Big pros. Plenty of room to grow into the hobby. You can keep a much wider variety of fish and corals, potentially including some beginner-friendly tangs, like a yellow tang, or dwarf angels, if you research their needs and compatibility thoroughly.
The balanced dimensions, 48 by 18, are fantastic for aquascaping.
Huge plus. The larger water volume means much slower parameter changes, giving you a big margin for error, which is great for beginners. It allows you to use standard-size equipment, lots of choices available, and the sump provides robust, flexible filtration.
Cons of the 75G. Must be some.
Higher initial cost is obvious. Higher ongoing operating costs, 2 more salt mix for water changes, more electricity for pumps and lights. Maintenance tasks are larger scale. A 15-20 gallon weekly water change is common. You'll almost certainly want an RDI water filter system at this point to make pure fresh water for mixing salt and topping off, which is another upfront cost. More components to potentially fail or maintain with a sump setup.
And it's heavy. Right.
Very heavy. Filled with water, rock, and sand, the 75G is easily over 600 pounds, maybe closer to 700, 800 pounds, depending on rock density. You absolutely need a strong, appropriate stand and should probably check your floor support, especially if not on a ground floor or concrete slab. Noise from the overflow and pumps can also be a factor with sumps, though quality gear and proper setup, like using a Herbie or Bean Animal style overflow, can make them very quiet.
What about ready-made systems for 75 gallons?
Yes, this is a popular size for manufacturer reef-ready packages. Companies like Red Sea, Reefer 350 is around 73G display plus sump, and Waterbox, Reef 100.3 is 78-gram display, offer packages that include the tank, a nice stand, the sump, and all the necessary plumbing.
But not the electronics.
Correct. You get the core system, beautifully integrated, often with nice cabinets and silent overflows. But you still choose and buy your own lights, skimmer, return pump, heaters, power heads.
Cost for those packages?
Usually in the $1,200 to $2,000 plus range, just for the tank stand sump plumbing package.
Pros of going that route.
Convenience and a professional look. Takes the guesswork and potential hassle out of drilling tanks and figuring out plumbing. You get a system designed to work together. Still allows customization of the important electronic gear. Cons. Mainly the high initial cost of the package itself before you even start buying the lights and skimmers, etc.
Okay, summing up the 75-gallon. Pros, fantastic choice for a committed beginner, offers a large, stable environment, allows great diversity of life, including some larger beginner fish, handles biological load well, great dimensions, suitable for LPS, and even trying easier SPS corals later. Hits a real sweet spot for long-term success.
Cons. It's a significant investment upfront and ongoing. Maintenance is larger scale. You'll pretty much need an auto top-off ATO system to handle evaporation, especially with the sump. Weight and space are major considerations. Potential for noise if not set up carefully. But overall, if you're serious about reefing, the 75G offers a wonderful balance and a system that can truly grow with you for years.
All right, last category in the sources. Entering the realm of truly large display tanks with the 9,100-gallon reef tank.
Yeah, now we're talking substantial systems. Impressive volume allows for an even broader range of fish, bigger schools, larger coral colonies, a real centerpiece tank.
Common sizes mentioned.
The 90-gallon, usually 48 centimeters long by 18 wide, but taller at 24, and the 120-gallon, often 48 centimeters by 24 tall, that extra width, is amazing. The principles just scale up significantly from the 75G.
How are these typically set up DIY? Some are mandatory now.
Virtually always set up with a sump filtration system. It's pretty much essential for managing a tank of this size effectively. You'll be using a reef-ready or drilled tank paired with a large sump, often 30-40 gallons or even bigger, giving you a total system volume potentially over 150 gallons.
Why is this sump so crucial here?
It provides the necessary space for the really large, powerful protein skimmers needed to handle the bioload. Room for multiple heaters, like 200-300 heaters for redundancy, is common. Space for larger media reactors, maybe a sizable refugium. It's all about robust, flexible, hidden filtration and increased total volume for stability.
And the stand needs to be serious.
Absolutely rock solid. A filled 90-gallon is approaching 1,000 pounds, and 120 gram is well over that. You need a purpose-built stand, and checking floor support becomes even more critical. Reinforcement might even be needed in some homes.
Gear requirements scale up too.
Massively. You need a higher flow return pump from the sump, 600, 800 plus GPH after accounting for head pressure. Multiple powerful circulation pumps inside the display, maybe 2 4+ units or large gyre pumps to ensure no dead spots across the 4 or 5 foot span. Lighting becomes a major expense and planning point. You need multiple high-quality LED units, potentially 2, 3, or even 4, to get adequate intensity and spread over the larger footprint and potentially greater depth. Budgeting $500, $750 or more just for lighting is very realistic.
And that auto top-off system.
Absolutely mandatory.
Yeah.
Evaporation from a large tank, especially with a sump and powerful lights pumps generating heat, can be significant. Letting salinity swing due to evaporation is detrimental. You'll also likely start thinking about dedicated power centers or controllers to manage all the equipment.
Costs for a DIY 9,100-gram setup getting steep now.
Yeah, it's a significant initial expense. That source guideline of $50 plus per gallon really starts to feel accurate here, especially if you're buying quality new gear. Getting a 100-gallon system fully equipped could easily approach or exceed $5,000. It's a serious commitment.
Okay, pros of going this big with DIY.
Highly stable system. The sheer volume provides an enormous buffer against chemical swings, supports a large bioload, meaning you can keep more fish, bigger fish, maybe schools of certain species, iconic tangs, creates a truly impressive ecosystem, ample space for large coral colonies to grow out. The sump allows for advanced filtration techniques like large refugiums or automatic dosing systems. Maintenance can almost feel easier in some ways because small issues get diluted more, but...
The cons are proportionally large, too.
Exactly. More of everything. More cost up front. More cost ongoing, electricity, salt, more physical work for maintenance, more space required. Initial expense is substantial. Maintenance tasks are just larger scale. A 20% water change is 20+ gallons, requiring you to mix salt water in bulk, maybe using large containers or dedicated mixing stations. It's significantly less portable.
Takes longer to mature, too.
Yes, these large systems take longer to fully cycle and mature, potentially going through longer ugly phases, require significant planning and research before you even buy anything. Checking floor support is absolutely critical. Aquascaping needs a lot more rock, more cost, and might even require 2 people to place large structures safely.
Ready-made systems common at this size.
Yes, very popular for those who want the integrated look without the DIY plumbing hassle. Packages like the Red Sea Reefer, $425 or $525, around $112 green total, or the Waterbox Reef, 100.3 or 130.4 are common examples. Tank, stand, sump, plumbing included. These often feature nice touches like dual overflows for safety, quality cabinetry, sometimes integrated ATO reservoirs. Price range for just the tank stand sump package is often several $1,000s, $1,800 plus.
Pros of these large packages.
Turnkey setup for the core components, saves planning time, ensures safe design regarding bracing and glass thickness, often incorporates neat features. Still lets you choose your preferred electronic gear. Cons. Cost is the main downside. And you still have significant purchases to make for lights, skimmer, pumps, etc. Requires assembly of the stand and plumbing connections, though it's usually well documented.
True plug-and-play systems that include everything.
Very rare and extremely expensive at this size. The sources might mention something like the Red Sea Max S series, like the S500, which is a complete ecosystem with hidden sump and all gear included. But the cost is prohibitive for most people, especially beginners.
Okay, summing up the 90-100-gallon range. Pros, definitely show tank territory, superb stability, allows incredible diversity of fish and corals, including larger species, sump enables advanced equipment, consummate art, significant responsibility and investment, large-scale consequences if things go wrong, major weight space floor support considerations, requires large-scale maintenance and bulk water mixing, takes longer to fully mature.
But it's worth noting, many beginners are successful starting this big, provided they do extensive research, plan meticulously, and have the budget and commitment. It's not impossible, just a much bigger undertaking.
And just to circle back on that cost per gallon thing.
Right, the $5,200 range.
Yeah.
It often feels more applicable to these larger sumped tanks, where you are buying higher capacities, sometimes higher-end gear, and benefiting from some economies of scale on things like rock or sand per gallon.
Whereas the nanos can sometimes cost more per gallon.
Exactly, because certain essential components, like a decent reef-capable light or a small protein skimmer, have a minimum cost regardless of whether the tank is 10 gallons or 20 gallons. You're paying for that core functionality, not just the water volume, so the cost per gallon can be higher on the small end.
Okay, that makes sense. We've covered the tanks, the sizes, the setups, the stability trade-offs. Now let's get to the exciting part, putting life into the tank. The sources are really big on patience here.
Huge. Patience is probably the single most important virtue in reef keeping. And starting with hardy, easy-care species is key to building confidence and avoiding early losses.
Let's talk about some specific hardy fish for beginners mentioned in the sources. These are generally peaceful and considered reef safe, meaning they won't typically eat corals.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Can't ignore the icon, Ocellaris clownfish, Nemo.
The classic. Very hardy, gets about 3 inches long. You can keep a single one, or a pair often works well in 20 gallons or more. And no, they do not need an anemone to be happy, despite the movie.
Pros of clowns.
Super hardy, develop great personalities, usually bold and visible, eat almost anything offered. Cons. Can become a bit territorial as they mature, especially if they decide to host a particular coral or even a powerhead.
Okay. Next up, Royal Grandma Basslet.
Gorgeous fish. Bright purple front half, yellow back half, about 3 inches, generally peaceful, but they like to hang out in caves and under ledges, often upside down. Good for 20 gallons plus.
Pros. Hardy.
Yes, beautiful and quite hardy once settled. Cons. Can be shy initially, hiding a lot. And they can be territorial towards other fish with a similar body shape or color, so usually best to keep just one per tank unless you have a very large system.
Firefish goby. Several types, right?
Yeah, the common red firefish, purple firefish, slender bodies, beautiful flowing dorsal fin, about 3 inches. They dart around. Very timid and peaceful tank mates.
And the big warning?
They're incredible jumpers. You absolutely, positively need a tight-fitting lid or screen top for these guys. No exceptions. Suitable for 10 gallons plus, but better in 20 plus, so they don't get stressed by too much activity.
Pros. Peaceful. Add nice movement. Easy to feed. Cons. Easily stressed by boisterous fish, will jump without a lid, usually best kept singly unless you get a confirmed pair.
How Banggai cardinal fish.
Yeah.
Very distinctive look.
Yeah, black and white stripes, silver spots, long fins, about 3 inches, very peaceful, tend to hover in midwater, often kept in pairs. Good for
Peaceful, hardy, don't need huge tanks, easy eaters. Cons. Males mouth-brood the eggs and may stop eating during that time. Can sometimes squabble if kept in groups unless they pair off naturally. Breed readily, but raising the fry is tricky.
Lawnmower blenny. Sounds useful.
They are. Great personality fish. Brownish, mottled pattern, get up to maybe 5 inches. They constantly graze on microalgae growing on the rocks and glass. Need a tank of at least 30 gallons with plenty of rock surface area for grazing.
Pros. Excellent natural algae control. Super entertaining to watch their behavior. Cons. Can sometimes be picky eaters if there isn't enough algae. May need supplementary feeding with dried seaweed, nori. Very rarely, a starving one might nip at coral polyps or clam mantles, can squabble with other blennies.
Let's do one more common one. Yellow watchman goby.
The bottom dwellers. Bright yellow, 3 to 4 inches, good for 20 gallons plus. What's their cool trick?
They often form a symbiotic relationship with the pistol shrimp. The shrimp is nearly blind, but digs and maintains a burrow, while the goby stands guard at the entrance, warning the shrimp of danger. Really fascinating to observe.
Pros. Hardy, amusing behavior, great with a shrimp partner, eat sinking foods easily. Cons. They are diggers, so make sure your rockwork is stable on the tank bottom, not just on the sand. The pistol shrimp makes audible clicking noises. Like most gobies, they can jump, so a lid is recommended. Territorial about their burrow.
The sources list others too, like blue-green chromis, small, active, inexpensive damsels, but schooling success can be hit or miss due to aggression. PJ cardinals, some dwarf angels like coral beauty or flame angel are hardy, but come with that caveat they might nip certain corals. Molly Miller blennies, tiny clown gobies.
And some reef-safe wrasses like the yellow wrasse, but need a sand bed and bigger tank.
Right. The main takeaway for fish is clear, though. Start with reef says, small, docile fish, known to be hardy for beginners. Avoid aggressive fish, fish with difficult diets like mandarins, or fish that get too large for your tank size, especially early on.
Makes sense. Build success with the easy ones first. Now, beginner corals. The sources say not all corals are created equal for newbies.
Not at all. The strong recommendation is to start with soft corals and many LPS large polyp stony corals.
Why those two groups specifically?
They are much, much more forgiving of the less than perfect water conditions often found in newer tanks. They don't need the ultra-stable, pristine water chemistry that SPS corals, small polyp stony like Acropora, demand.
They'd tolerate some nutrient fluctuation.
Yes, they generally tolerate and sometimes even prefer slightly higher nitrate and phosphate levels, say 520 ppm nitrate, 0.05 there, 0.1 ppm phosphate, compared to SPS, which like near zero. This is good because new tanks often have fluctuating nutrient levels. They're also usually less expensive, often grow faster, giving you quicker results, and don't typically require you to start dosing supplements like calcium and alkalinity right away. Regular water changes usually provide enough for their initial growth.
Okay, let's hit some specific beginner soft corals mentioned. These don't have a hard skeleton, right?
Correct, they're fleshy. Very popular starters are zoanthins and palithoa, often just called zoas and pallas. They form colorful mats of small polyps.
Easy cure.
Generally, yes. Moderate light, moderate flow, tolerate nutrients well, grow relatively fast. Big caution, though. Some palithoa species contain a potent neurotoxin called palitoxin. Always wear gloves and eye protection when handling them out of water, but visually, great beginner choice.
Mushroom corals. Lots of variety here.
Tons. Discosoma, Ricordea, Rhodactis. All sorts of colors and textures. Very hardy. They like lower to moderate light and flow, often good for filling in lower areas of the rockwork or even the sand bed. They multiply by splitting. Very tolerant of imperfect water. Sometimes they might detach and float around if unhappy, and some types can spread quite quickly, but they're usually easy to remove if needed.
Leather corals. Sounds tough.
They are pretty tough. Things like toadstool leathers, finger leathers, and the infamous Kenya tree coral. They have a distinctive leathery texture. Hardy, can grow quite large over time. Toadstools periodically shed a waxy layer, which is normal. Kenya tree is almost bulletproof, but known for dropping branches that readily attach and grow elsewhere, can become weedy if not managed. Leathers can release some chemicals, but usually managed fine with water changes and maybe running activated carbon.
Okay, two more really common softies. Green star polyps, GSP.
Instantly recognizable. A mat of bright, almost neon green polyps that wave beautifully in the current. Extremely hardy, grows very fast under moderate light and flow.
The downside of fast growth.
It can spread like a lawn over your rockwork, potentially smothering other corals. Many reefers isolate GSP on its own island rock, or are prepared to prune it back regularly by peeling or scraping the mat off the rock. But it adds instant color and movement.
And Esnia, the pulsing kind.
Pulsing xenia. Fascinating to watch the polyps rhythmically open and close. Also very hardy and spreads rapidly when conditions are right. Often likes slightly higher nutrients. Like GSP and Kenya tree, can become invasive if not controlled, but adds unique motion.
So the theme with easy softies. Hardy, tolerant, often fast-growing, but manage the fast growers so they don't take over.
Pretty much. It's a good problem to have, means they're thriving. Now for LPS corals, large polyp stony. These have a hard skeleton but big, fleshy polyps. Many are quite suitable for beginners once the tank is stable.
What do they need primarily?
Stable alkalinity and calcium are more important here than for softies as they build that skeleton. Regular water changes help a lot initially. They generally prefer moderate, often indirect, water flow. Too much direct flow can damage the fleshy polyps.
Recommendations for beginner LPS.
Duncan coral, Duncanopsamia, is often recommended as a great first LPS. It has branching stalks with large, flower-like polyps. Hardy, grows new heads relatively quickly, nice green or purplish colors, can be target-fed easily.
Trumpet coral or candy cane coral, Calastria.
Another excellent choice. Looks like branching stalks topped with puffy, often bright green or teal-striped candy cane heads. Very forgiving. Good indicator coral 2 polyps will retract if conditions are off, but usually bounce back quickly once corrected. Moderate light will accept target feeding.
What about the popular Euphilia corals, hammers, fog spawn, torches?
These are stunning, with large polyps and long flowing tentacles that add amazing movement. Hammer corals and frog spawn corals are generally considered the hardiest of the group and suitable for beginners with stable tanks. Need moderate light and usually gentle to moderate flow. Big consideration. They have powerful sweeper tentacles that they extend, especially at night, to sting neighboring corals. You absolutely must give them plenty of space inches away from other corals.
Are torch corals harder?
Torches often seem a bit more sensitive or demanding regarding flow and light, and their sting can be particularly potent. Maybe wait a bit longer before trying torches. But hammers and frog spawn are great beginner LPS.
Any others? Brain corals.
Yeah, certain types of brain corals, like favites or favia, can be reasonably hardy. Encrusting or dome shapes. Moderate light, usually placed lower on rocks or on the sand bed. They also have feeding tentacles at night, so give them space. Generally slower growing than Duncans or Calastria.
The sources mention Montipora briefly as maybe an easier SPS to try later.
Right. Plating or branching Montipora species are often considered the entry point into SPS corals. They are more forgiving than Acropora, but still require more stable water chemistry, especially alkalinity and calcium, stronger lighting, and higher flow than the softies and LPS we've discussed. Definitely something to try after you've had success with easier corals for a while.
So overall beginner coral strategy. Start with hardy softies and LPS. They're colorful, grow well, tolerate newbie tanks, don't need complex dosing at first. Just watch out for the fast spreaders.
Exactly. And remember to dip new corals to prevent pests.
Okay, crucial members of the tank often overlooked by absolute beginners. The cleanup crew, CUC, and other useful invertebrates.
Essential. These aren't just optional extras. They are vital parts of the ecosystem. The snails, crabs, shrimp that constantly work to eat algae and leftover food, detritus.
When do you add them?
You add the CUC after the tank is fully cycled. Ammonia and nitrite are 0. And typically when you start seeing that first wave of algae, the diatoms or green algae of the ugly phase, they are generally more sensitive to ammonia and nitrite than hardy fish, so the cycle must be complete. And drip acclimate them slowly, just like fish.
What are the key CUC players recommended?
Snails are the workhorses. Different types do different jobs. Trochus snails are fantastic all-around grazers for film algae on rocks and glass, and a big plus is they can usually right themselves if they fall over. Astrea snails are also good algae eaters, often cheaper, but they famously cannot flip themselves back over. If they fall upside down on the fan, you'll likely have to rescue them or they'll perish.
Nacerius snails. They sound interesting.
They are cool. They live buried in the sand bed, and when they smell food, they erupt out like little zombies with their snorkels waving. Great scavengers for leftover fish food and detritus, and help stir the very top layer of sand. Cerith snails are smaller, good all-around cleaners on rocks, glass, sand, eating algae and detritus. Often reproduce in tanks. Turbo snails, especially the large Mexican turbos, are bulldozers for algae, particularly hair algae.
Bulldozers?
Yeah, they're big and clumsy and can knock over loose corals or unsecured rocks. They also need a good supply of algae or supplemental feeding. Better for larger tanks, 55G plus. Smaller turbo species are less destructive. Nerate snails are good film algae eaters, but have a tendency to crawl out of the water, so a lid is needed.
What about hermit crabs?
Stick to the tiny species. Blue-legged hermits or scarlet reef hermits. They are great scavengers, picking at algae and leftover food, getting into small crevices. Pros: agile cleaners. Cons: they are opportunistic. They need larger empty shells to move into as they grow, and they will sometimes kill snails to steal their shells, especially if not enough empty ones are available. Always provide extra empty shells of various sizes. Blue legs are tiny and active algae eaters, good for nanos. Scarlets are a bit larger, often considered slightly more peaceful or less likely to bother snails. Avoid the larger hermit species often sold.
Cleaner shrimp seem almost essential for the classic reef tank look.
The scarlet skunk cleaner shrimp, Lismata amboinensis, is the most popular. White stripe down the back, flanked by red stripes. They set up cleaning stations, and fish will actually visit them to have parasites picked off. Hardy once acclimated, but best added after the tank is more stable, maybe 3+ months old.
They eat leftover food, too.
Oh yeah, they're great scavengers. Pros. Very interactive and visible, perform a useful cleaning function for fish. Cons. Can be bold and might try to steal food directly from corals you're trying to feed. Sensitive to high nitrates and sudden water chemistry swings. Other useful shrimp include peppermint shrimp, often used to combat Aptasia pestinemones, but more reclusive, and the beautiful but shy fire shrimp. Acclimate all shrimp very slowly and carefully.
What about crabs other than hermits? Emerald crabs.
Emerald crabs, Mithraculus sculptus. Small green crabs often touted for eating nuisance bubble algae, Phellonia, and some hair algae. Generally considered reef safe, but like any crab, if very hungry, they might opportunistically pick at coral polyps or bother other inverts. 1 per 20-30 gallons is a common stocking level. Pros. Can help with specific nuisance algae. Cons. Still that small opportunistic risk. Some just seem lazy and don't eat much algae. Worth trying if you have bubble algae issues.
Urchins. Starfish.
Urchins like the tuxedo urchin can be amazing algae eaters, especially on rockwork, but only add them to a well-established tank, 6+ months, that has plenty of algae for them to eat. They can starve in new, clean tanks. They will also knock over anything not glued down. Sensitive to water changes? Acclimate carefully. Optional for medium-large mature tanks. Starfish. Most ornamental starfish are not beginner-friendly. They often have very specific diets and starve in typical home aquariums. The tiny brittle stars that sometimes come as hitchhikers on live rock are great detritivores. Larger brittle stars, like banded or tiger striped, can be hardy scavengers in larger 55G+ mature tanks. Avoid the green brittle star, it's predatory. Starfish are generally very sensitive to changes, wait at least 6 months.
So the idea is to build a diverse CUC with different roles. Surface grazers, sand sifters, scavengers. Don't just dump in 50 snails.
Exactly. Start modestly based on your tank size and the amount of algae detritus you see. You can always add more later if needed. The sources often give example CUC packages for different tank sizes.
This leads perfectly into the overall stocking timeline. The sources stress this. Patience. Patience, patience.
Cannot emphasize it enough. Nothing good happens fast in a reef tank is the mantra. Rushing almost always leads to problems, dead livestock, and frustration. This timeline is a general guideline. Always monitor your water parameters.
Okay, step 1, initial setup and cycling, weeks 0 to 4+.
This is the foundation. Day 0. Set up the tank, equipment, add your salt water mixed to 1.025 specific gravity, add substrate, sand, add rockwork, aquascape. Then immediately start the nitrogen cycle.
Which is establishing the beneficial bacteria.
Right. Those bacteria process toxic ammonia from fish waste decaying food into less toxic nitrite, and then other bacteria process nitrate into much less toxic nitrate. You need an ammonia source to kickstart this. Pure bottled ammonia or a piece of raw shrimp left to decay are common methods. Using bottled bacteria products can help speed things up.
What happens during weeks 1 to 2?
You test your water regularly. Ammonia, nitrite, nitrate. You'll see ammonia levels spike up first. Then, as bacteria start working, ammonia will drop and nitrite levels will start to rise. You just wait and test. Keep topping off evaporated water with fresh rhodii water daily. Absolutely no fish or corals yet.
Weeks 3 to 4.
Ammonia should drop to 0 or near 0. Nitrite will likely peak and then start to fall as the second type of bacteria kicks in. The goal is to reach a point where ammonia ppm and nitrite equals 0 ppm. Nitrate will likely be present, possibly quite high.
And once ammonia and nitrate are 0?
Your basic biological filter is established. Do a partial water change, maybe 20-30%, to lower those accumulated nitrates.
Milestone. Tank cycled.
Yes. But it's like a brand new engine. It runs, but it's not broken in yet. It can handle some waste, but it's still fragile. Good idea to double check. Add a tiny pinch of fish food or a drop of ammonia. Test 24 hours later, ammonia and nitrite should still be 0. And so you're truly cycled. But do not add all your fish at once.
Yep. Step 2, the ugly phase and cleanup crew, weeks 4 to 8.
As the cycle completes, and especially if you start running your lights, the infamous ugly phase often begins. This is totally normal. Don't panic when you see it.
What does it look like?
Usually starts with a brown dusting of diatoms covering everything. Then you might get blooms of green algae, filamentous, hair algae, etc., maybe even patches of cyanobacteria, which looks like slimy red, green, or black mats.
Why does this happen?
It's fueled by leftover nutrients, silicates, phosphates, nitrates, from the cycle and the initial setup, combined with light. The ecosystem isn't balanced yet. Different organisms bloom as conditions favor them. Now is the time to add your cleanup crew, CUC. Once you see this algae appearing AD, you've confirmed ammonia and nitrite are firmly at zero. Start with that small, tailored crew we discussed. They will help graze down the diatoms and algae, shortening the duration of the ugly phase.
Can you manage it with lighting, too?
Yes. Running lights on a reduced schedule, maybe 6 to 8 hours, or lower intensity initially, can help limit the fuel for algae growth. You'll likely need to manually scrub or siphon out some of the green algae as well. Keep testing nitrate and phosphate, do water changes if they get really high, but remember, some level is normal and even needed.
Milestone. Algae bloom under control. Eventually, the diatoms usually burn themselves out as silicates get consumed, maybe by week 8-12. Green algae is hopefully kept in check by your CUC and manual removal. You might even see the first specks of desirable coralline algae, pink-purple, appearing on the rocks around 2-3 months, a good sign of maturing conditions.
Okay, stage 3, first fish introduction, around week 6 to 8.
Finally, the tank is cycled, CUC is munching away. Time for fish.
Yes, but slowly. Add just 1 or 2 hardy fish first. Choose from that beginner list. This allows the biological filter to gradually adapt to processing real fish waste.
Acclimation is key here.
Crucial. Float the bag to equalize temperature first. Then slowly introduce tank water into the fish's bag or a separate container over at least 30-60 minutes. Drip acclimation is best, to let the fish adjust to your water's salinity and pH. Net the fish out. Don't dump the bag water in your tank. And the most important part, go extremely slowly. Add only 1 or 2 fish, then wait at least 2 full weeks, maybe even 3 or 4, before considering adding another fish.
Wise wait.
Gives the beneficial bacteria population time to multiply and adjust to the increased bioload from the new fish. Adding too many fish too quickly is the #1 way beginners crash their cycle, leading to ammonia and nitrite spikes and dead fish. It also lets you observe the first fish, make sure it's eating and healthy, before adding more variables. Keep testing ammonia and nitrite after adding fish. They must remain at 0. If you see any rise, do a water change immediately and hold off on adding more fish and maybe feed less. Feed the new fish lightly at first.
So, stocking the tank with fish is a process that takes months, not a single weekend trip to the store.
Absolutely. You'll continue adding fish very slowly, 1 or 2 at a time, with weeks in between over the next couple of months, weeks 8-12 plus. Research compatibility between species before you buy. The sources mention quarantine tanks again as the ideal way to prevent introducing diseases, but acknowledge it's an extra step beginners might skip, so sourcing healthy fish is paramount.
Milestone. First fish thriving. You've successfully kept your first fish alive and healthy for several weeks. Ammonia and nitrate are consistently 0. You're getting into a routine of feeding, weekly testing, and maybe doing your first small water change with fish in the tank. Always match temperature and salinity closely. The tank has life. The microbial community is stabilizing. It's getting there.
All right, step 4. First corals, around 2-3 months in.
Okay, the tank has stable fish life. When can we add those beginner corals?
The sources generally suggest waiting until about 8 to 12 weeks. So 2-3 months, after the initial setup. The key criteria are: the tank must be fully cycled with 0 ammonia and nitrite for at least a month straight. The first fish should be established and healthy. And the initial major algae blooms should be reasonably under control. Seeing some coralline algae starting to grow is a great sign the water chemistry is stabilizing in a good way for corals. But you don't necessarily have to wait for widespread coralline growth to add the first hardy softies or LPS.
For corals.
Definitely dip new coral frags or colonies in a coral dip solution before adding them to your tank. This helps remove potential pests like nuisance algae, flatworms, or predatory snails that might have hitchhiked.
Placement in the tank.
Good practice is to place new corals lower in the tank initially, then gradually move them up over a week or 2 to acclimate them to your specific lighting intensity. Give them appropriate flow, usually moderate and indirect for most beginner corals. Avoid blasting them directly. Before adding stony corals, LPS, you should really start testing for alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium, in addition to salinity, temp, pH, nitrate, and phosphate. Stability, especially for alkalinity, aiming for somewhere stable between 8-10 DKH, is key for LPS growth. Water changes help maintain these initially. Make sure phosphate isn't too high, ideally 0.03, 0.1 ppm, and nitrate is reasonable. 520 ppm is often fine or even beneficial for these corals.
Add corals gradually, too.
Yes. just like fish. Start with 1 or 2 easy ones. See how they respond over a week. If they're opening fully and look happy, you can add a couple more slowly over the following weeks. Remember to inspect and dip every new piece. Adjust your lighting schedule intensity based on how the corals react. Stretching might mean they need more light. Bleaching or shrinking could mean too much. Start lights dimmer, maybe 30–40% intensity, and slowly ramp up to 50–60% maybe over weeks.
Milestone. Reef tank begins. Okay, now it's really starting to look like a reef. By month 3 or 4, you likely have your first fish settled, a CUC working, and your first corals adding color and life. The focus shifts from just getting through the cycle to maintaining that stable environment through consistent testing and maintenance. Water changes are your main tool for replenishing elements initially. Dosing might come much later, 6+ months, if you have a lot of stony coral growth.
Exactly. Step 5, expanding the community, 3 to 6+ months.
The tank is getting more stable now, past the really volatile early stage.
Right. It's maturing. Now you can continue to add additional livestock slowly. Maybe some more intermediate corals, perhaps hardier LPS varieties, or trying that first plating Monopora. Add more fish, carefully considering compatibility and your tank's bioload limit. Add more inverts like that cleaner shrimp around month 4 or 5, or maybe a tuxedo urchin if algae warrants it after 6 months. This period is all about tank maturation. A reef tank is often considered mature, somewhere between 6 and 12 months old. The biological processes are stable, chemical parameters tend to settle into predictable ranges, nuisance algae is usually minimal and controlled, and your initial corals and fish have grown. The hidden ecosystem of copepods, amphipods, worms, and bacteria, microfauna, is thriving.
Are there specific creatures that really need this mature stage?
Yes, definitely. We mentioned mandarin dragonets. They need that established copepod population, so typically 9–12+ months minimum, often in larger tanks, 50 gram plus. Anemones are notorious wanderers and can sting corals or get sucked into pumps if conditions aren't stable. They do best in tanks at least 6 months to a year old. Tridactid clams also need stable parameters, especially calcium alkalinity, and good lighting, best added after 6+ months. Patience allows these delicate organisms a much better chance.
What pitfalls should people watch out for as the tank matures? Complacency.
That's a big one. Don't get lazy with testing or water changes just because things seem stable. Don't overstock just because you can research every addition. Avoid chasing perfect numbers. Stability within acceptable ranges is far more important than constantly tweaking things with chemicals. Keep an eye out for new pests that might sneak in on corals. Always dip. Your maintenance might evolve now too, maybe adding a media reactor, definitely relying on that ATO.
Milestone. 6-month-old reef. A good time to step back and appreciate the progress. You should have a nice collection of growing corals, happy fish, and active CUC. The worst of the ugly algae should be a distant memory. You might face minor challenges now and then. A patch of cyano, maybe some dinoflagellates pop up if nutrients bottom out, but you'll have more experience to handle them.
And finally, stage 6. Long term, 1 year and beyond.
What's reef keeping like after the first year? Cruise control.
Hopefully, yes. The tank should be quite stable, your maintenance routine well established. Corals will have grown into larger colonies, maybe needing pruning. Fish are full grown. This is often when hobbyists might consider trying more sensitive additions, like demanding SPS corals, acropora, or that anemone they've been wanting. Success rates are much higher in a truly mature system. The key advice here remains: avoid complacency. Keep up with maintenance. Clean pumps and power heads periodically. Make sure test kits haven't expired. Don't panic over tiny fluctuations if the inhabitants look healthy. Stability is still paramount.
And some corals might really take off.
Oh yeah, those fast growers like GSP, Cynia, maybe Kenya tree, or certain leathers might need regular trimming or fragging to prevent them from overtaking the tank. This becomes part of the gardening aspect of the hobby managing growth. Maybe trading or selling frags.
It's a continuous process.
Absolutely. Enjoy the journey, the constant learning, watching your own little piece of the ocean evolve.
Okay, let's wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot, from 10 gallons all the way up to 100. Key takeaway on size seems to be the trade-off. Smaller means lower initial cost and space, but demands intense diligence due to instability.
While larger tanks require a bigger investment and footprint but offer that crucial stability and forgiveness, making the learning curve potentially gentler for a beginner, assuming they do their research.
Setups range from budget DIY, convenient AIOs, to integrated reef-ready systems. Choose based on budget, space, and how hands-on you want to be.
And for livestock, start hardy and slow. Easy fish, easy soft corals, and LPS first. Add that tailored cleanup crew at the right time.
But the thread running through everything in these sources is patience. Follow that slow, step-by-step stocking timeline over months, not days. Let the system mature.
That's the foundation for success. That $5,200 per gallon cost estimate, it's real, especially for well-equipped larger tanks. But remember, stability is what you're buying with volume, and budget strategies exist.
Ultimately, regardless of the size you choose, patience, consistent maintenance, and a willingness to learn seem to be the universal ingredients for a thriving reef.
Well said. It's a rewarding path if you respect the process.
You know, it really is amazing when you stop and think about it. You're essentially creating and curating this complex miniature world in a glass box. The patience it demands, the observation skills you develop, understanding how unseen bacteria fuel the whole system.
It's applied biology, chemistry, and engineering, all in your living room.
Maybe that connection, that responsibility for this tiny ecosystem and the discipline it teaches. Maybe it gives you a different kind of appreciation for the complexity and fragility of the real reefs out there in the ocean. Something to think about beyond just the tank itself.
A profound thought to end on. The reef tank as a window and a teacher.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into starting your reef keeping journey. We hope these insights from the sources help you take that plunge with confidence.